And we are live, guys.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome, guys. Welcome. Welcome, guys. We're super keen for part two. Today, hopefully, we're going to wrap up the Netflix clone. It's going to be epic. Yeah, so I guess we're just going to give like 1 minute to let people trickle in, and we're just going to jump right into it. So, in case you missed anything, you can always rewind and you can watch from where we left off.
Awesome.
So, Harjot Phoenix basically has a question. Would it be hard to keep up if I missed the first workshop? Not really, because we'll be diving into a whole lot more detail in this workshop. We will do a small recap. But in case you're lost anywhere, please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll try our best to address them.
Awesome, man. I still see a few people joining, so we'll just wait for a minute or so. Let's start at 5 past.
Okay, Harjot.
Akhil, do you want to just go over the links where they can find all the GitHub link, assets, and everything?
Yeah, sure. So basically, all the assets can be found in this repository over here. What I'm actually going to do right now is I'm just going to download this, right? Actually, rather than downloading, what you guys can do is you can download it over here. So I'll just drop this link over here in the chat. GitHub link.
Awesome, man.
Epic. What I'm going to do is something slightly different because I'm going to have to clone the repository. What's up, guys? Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're just waiting for a few people to trickle in. You can totally ignore what I'm doing right now.
Nathan, how's it going? Shane, Rishi, Michael here. Awesome.
Great.
Just waiting for everyone to join and we'll get started. I'm gonna do the same thing Akhil is doing. I'm gonna clone the repository.
Cool. So, Harjot, can I begin? What do you think?
Yes, I think we can get started. We have about 29 viewers right now. They're still increasing though, eh?
I guess let's just start it with doing a few of admin stuff before we get right into the main stuff.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's do this, man. Let's get started.
Let's do this, guys. I'm super keen for this one. This one's gonna be really fun. This is the one where you're going to get to add something to your portfolio. Great. So, guys, we're just continuing from where we left off last week, where we just did a few of the basics. And today we're just going to go into a whole lot more detail, especially with CSS, because we covered a lot of HTML last week, right? So this should be a lot of fun. This is the Intro to Web Development course. It's us again. We're not going to do too many intros, but we've just dropped our Instagram links over here. So if you haven't connected with us yet on Instagram, please look for these tags. I'm Harjot Singh, Akhil Bodu, and Zayo.io. We'd love to know you guys. So Phoenix is asking for the GitHub repo. It's right above here. I'm gonna drop it again.
Let me also drop the link on the YouTube chat quickly.
Awesome, guys. And again, just a little bit about Zayo. If you haven't heard about us yet, we basically kickstart careers. That's our biggest mission. And how we do that is first we identify high potential talent. We put them through our amazing training programs, make them industry ready, because industry readiness, work readiness is a huge problem, especially because what we're learning at university is not sufficient enough for performing well in industry. And then we help them get a high paying job. So that's what Zayo does. Let us jump into the agenda. Again, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So reminder, this is basically how we're running our workshops. We want it to be engaging. This is the biggest point from this slide. We want this session to be engaging. If you have any questions, please drop it in the WhatsApp chat and I'm sorry, not WhatsApp, the YouTube live stream, and we'll do our best to address the questions. And yeah, so this week, we're going to do a whole lot more building. So be on guard. We'll be covering a lot. In case you miss anything, please don't stress about it because everything is being recorded. Just try to follow along with whatever we are doing. If you miss something and you feel like you're getting left behind, don't worry about that. Just focus on the new things that we're covering, right? Because we've got a lot to cover this session. We're going to do our best to go through a lot of CSS concepts. And hopefully by the end of this session, you have something good enough to add to your portfolio, right? Obviously, you can work a whole lot more on it. This is only 3 hours of work that we're doing. And this whole, if you spend just another 1 hour, another 2 hours, you can get this to a whole other level. So guys, again, reminder, this is a crash course. We're not covering everything in HTML, CSS. We'll just do our best to equip you with what you need to get started. And yeah, let us do a quick recap. So I have my code base in front of me over here. Basically what Harjot and I worked on last week while we were trying to get the Netflix app started. So as you can see, we did a little bit of HTML. So we created this HTML document. You can see that there's this file structure. There's the doc type, HTML head, body. Inside the body, there's a whole bunch of other HTML elements. We worked on headings. We did a paragraph. We did a list. And then there's also how you can use 8 anchor tags to refer to other pages. And then we also did some styles. We covered internal CSS where you can add styles to the document. We covered inline styling using adding CSS. CSS is basically for styling the HTML. HTML is for adding the actual elements in your document. And then we use external CSS to add styles in a separate document, which is what we'll be focusing on. So as you can see, that is a quick recap of what we have done last week. And yeah, let's get right into it. So Harjot, over to you.
Let's do this. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Cool. So last week we went through CSS basics. So I'm just going to blaze through it quickly. It's just a quick refresher. So Akhil, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, all right. So we went through the basic syntax. So the basic syntax is basically a selector, which basically selects the element or a property from the HTML page. And then we have the declaration where you actually declare the CSS values. So CSS properties, so things like color, font size, all these are CSS properties. And each declaration has a property and a value. So we'll be going through the different ways we actually added CSS into HTML. And the first way was inline CSS. And this is where you directly add the styling into the HTML element. So the H1 element, for example, over here, we use the style attribute and put in the CSS property in there. And this is how you do the inline CSS. But we won't be using this, especially because like you don't want to mix CSS and HTML on one page. It gets very messy, and it's usually bad practice using this method. The second way was internal CSS, and you usually use this when you have one single HTML page, and you basically use the style tag in HTML inside the header tag, and you add the CSS properties in that, and using the same format. The first part is so it's basically the selector and the declaration. So the body is the selector, and then we're declaring CSS color red. And then this is my favorite, as I mentioned earlier last week. And what we do over here is you add all your CSS code in an external file, which is saved as it's usually a .css file, and you add all your CSS properties in that file. And I'll give you an example right now. This is what we did last week. So we have this index.html file. I'm going to open the styles.css file as well. I'm just going to open this side by side. And left, yeah. So what I did was first created the style.css file and then linked it with the HTML file using the link tag inside the header tag in HTML. And let me just close this quickly so you can see all the code. Hide. It's not working good. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So inside the HTML page, I've linked it using this. So you use the style sheet and you use the absolute path to attach the style.css in the HTML file. And once that is done, we can test it out using, you just add the CSS property inside the CSS file. So body is the selector, and then we have the properties inside curly brackets. We tested the background color black. I can change that to purple, and let's see the change. And the background changes to purple. So we can confirm that our style.css file is actually linked to our index.html file now. So I can add all my CSS into style.css, and it will reflect in my index.html. So that's basically external CSS. You can also add multiple style sheets. So for example, if I want to add a responsive style sheet, that's usually for mobile phone. So a mobile phone will basically have a different separate style sheet from a desktop because of the screen sizing. So you usually use different styles on a phone and different styles on a desktop. So what you do is basically create another file. I'll call it, okay, where is this gone? The folders page. Akhil, do you know what I did just now? I just lost the folders section over here.
Not quite sure what the issue is. I mean, yeah, it's
Okay.
all right. Okay, okay, there we go.
Yeah. So I'm going to create a new file called responsive.css. So inside responsive.css, I actually saved it outside the folder. I'm just going to push it inside the folder. Just going to move it inside. The responsive.css will contain any styling for, let's say, for mobile phones, right? And you can attach that in the similar manner, use the link tag again, and just tag link it right below it or above it. The cool thing is when you link a style sheet below another style sheet, and you write over a similar style. For example, if I write the body tag inside responsive.css, it will overwrite the previous styles and show the styles in responsive.css. So for example, I'm just gonna quickly give you an example. So style sheet, href, using, I'm going to link it now. Dot style responsive. Cool. And inside responsive, I'll use the same body tag. So we use the body styling in style.css, and I'm going to do the same thing in responsive style, and change the background color to black now because purple. So the style.css has purple, so I'm going to change it to black. And as you can see, the responsive.css has overwritten style.css, and that's because I've linked it right below style.css. I've linked responsive.css right below style.css. So this basically allows us to overwrite styles, usually not required, but if you find an error, if you see a lot of things changing, it might be because of one style writing over another style. So you probably want to cross-check that error. Cool. The next thing I'll go over is a favicon link, a fav icon. And a fav icon is basically this top icon over there. That really makes a website look legit, you know? Like, look at our current landing page. It doesn't have that icon, looks terrible. So we can do that using the link tag again. I'm gonna link it, and I already have the assets downloaded. And if you don't have the assets downloaded, you can go get it from GitHub. Just clone the repository, or just download the repository, and you should have the assets. So I'm going to use the link tag again and use a relative of icon and an href of the fab icon.png. So that's the syntax. This is called icon, href. It's inside assets, so asset slash fav icon. And this will change. That will add the fav icon to our current landing page. That looks better. Cool. So now that we started with fav icon, let's just go over selectors quickly. So there are many ways of selecting an HTML element, and whichever you want to style. There's like simple selectors, that's name, ID, class. We just went over one of them. Combinator selectors, pseudo class selectors. There are a number of ways, but we'll be focusing on simple selectors for this workshop. And maybe if we come across like pseudo class selectors, we'll just go over it. So the selector element basically uses, that's the one we just used. It gets the element from the HTML page. For example, h1 is an element, a body tag is an element. So it looks for the body tag, and you can style that that element in the CSS. And then the second way is using IDs. So the ID selector basically uses the ID attribute inside an HTML element to select a specific tag. So for example, let's say, let me just remove this inline styling. And let's change H2. So I have some styling up here as well. I'm just going to remove that as well. So I'll give this H2 an ID of, let's say, header, or header title something. Okay. And we can style that specific ID using the hash character. So use the hash character to style the h2 tag because the ID is unique to this element, the h2 element. So I'm just going to remove the code from the responsive.css. We're not going to be using responsive.css. We'll stick to style.css. And I'm just going to use the hash h2 and change the color of that font to green. Oh, it's not h2, sorry, my bad. It's called header. You use the header title in that. So you're calling the ID reference. So that's header title, and as you can see, h2 changed to green. So IDs are basically used. It's unique to a specific tag. You can't really use the same ID in multiple tags or multiple elements inside HTML. But that problem can be solved using classes. Let's say you want to have a large font class, so like just going back to classes, we define classes using the dot character, the period character. And so I'm just going to define a specific class called large font. Okay. So using the period character, large font, and I'll change the font size to something ridiculous, 80px. It's large. Okay. Now, if I want to use this class, this specific class, I can use the class attribute inside the HTML element. So for example, I'll just remove this ID now. Let's say I want the font size of H3 and H1 of this specific H1 and this specific H3 to be 70px. So I'm going to add the class attribute and we define it as large font. So I'll just type large font here. If I save that, that changes to 70px. And I can reuse the same class inside another element. So I'll define class here, and we're going to change H1, unlimited movies, TV shows, that specific line to 70px. So that's large font. And as you can see, the font changes. Another cool thing is you can also define more than one classes. Let's say I want the font to be blue. So I can define a class called blue fonts. So color should be blue. And I can define multiple classes to the same element, the same HTML element. So in front, I'll give a space after large font and type blue font. And as you can see, the font color changes to blue. This is how you can make use of classes. I love using classes the best way. You can reuse the same CSS styling again and again. And then another cool thing is grouping selectors. You can group selectors. And for example, if you want all the H1, H2, H3 tags to have the same color, I'm just going to remove these classes right now. I'll just delete this code here, class attributes. I want all H1s and H3s to have a font color of red. So you can group selectors with a comma. So H1, comma, H2, or as I said H3, and color should be red. And that will change all the selector colors to red. So this is H1 and this is H3. And the next way is a universal selector. And a universal selector basically selects all HTML elements on the page and defines the CSS property to it. So if I want to define something, let's say I want to change, and I'm just trying to find an example, maybe font size, all the font size to a specific size. I can change that. So I'll just use the star. So you use the star character and then you add the CSS in front of it. So I'm going to change the font size of everything to, let's say 16px. And usually you define the font size to 16px because you can then use relative sizing. We'll come back to that later on. But I basically define font size for the entire document, entire HTML page to 16px. And this is how you can standardize, you can apply styles to the entire HTML page. Cool. And then CSS comments. Another good practice is whenever you're writing some CSS code or you just want to comment out something, you can comment it out using this syntax. I usually don't use that. Visual Studio allows me to comment using an easier shortcut. So I'm using a Mac, and if you click Command / it will comment it out for you. So that's the easiest way to comment out code, or if you just want to comment something on a specific style. All right, Akhil, that was basically the basics of CSS. We're going to be jumping into how the entire Netflix page is structured, and Akhil will take you through that in HTML. And then once that is done, we'll start styling Netflix. Awesome.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So Harjot, let me start sharing my screen now. Great. So here we are. This is the Netflix page that we want to build right now, right? And before we continue, let us talk a little bit about the div element, right? So I'm sure if you guys have inspected or viewed a page source, you'll see a lot of div elements. Div basically stands for division. It's used to write your codes in different sections, right? It's used to divide your content into sections so that it makes sense. And also, when you want to style your code, right? You want to style your code based on certain sections. Like you want one section to look a certain way, you want another section to look another way, right? So let us dive into the meat of this, right? Let's start adding sections to our Netflix app, right? So this is actually the original Netflix page, right? And on the original Netflix page, what you first do is, if you want to create the sections, you've got to identify what different sections are on the page, right? So first things first, you can see that this is actually the header, right? This is the nav bar. So you can see that there's a nav bar over here, and then there's like a container inside over here. And I think outside of this is like a banner wrap, like it's a banner area. Inside the banner area, there's like a background I can see there, and there's a background, and then inside the background, there's like the menu area, and then inside the menu area, there's like a container, and then inside the container, you have this H1 over here, you have this H2 over here, you have this H3 over here. And then you also have a form over here, which we'll talk about. But that is the general structure that I can see right now, right? So now if we want to take this to our code, right? Now we've identified the different sections of this app, and we can use the div element, which is the HTML element, to style it, right? So Harjot, have you pushed your code? Can you push your code maybe so I can pull it?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that now. Sorry.
No stress. So yeah, guys, if you're worried about what we're doing with this pushing and pulling of code, please don't stress about it. That is something we won't have time to cover today. But briefly speaking, what we're doing here is we're collaborating with a tool called Git. Git helps for collaboration. And what Harjot is doing is he's pushing the code to a cloud repository, and I'm pulling the changes that Harjot has made from that repository. And that's how Git works, right? So Harjot, have you pushed the code? Can I pull?
Yeah, go for it.
So just observe carefully. Now I've pulled the code, and you can see whatever Harjot has done has reflected in my page now, right? I do have live server open here. So you can see that whatever changes Harjot made appear here now, right? So I think first things first, let me just move the zoom thing down here. What I'll do is I'm just gonna, Harjot, is it all right if I remove all these styles? We can start from scratch.
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna remove all the styles. And what we'll do now is we're going to start styling using our div element that we just learned about, right? So you can see that the first thing is we have like this banner wrap area. So when I say banner wrap, I mean like this this big section over here until this gray line where we have a bunch of elements, right? So like just the general practice is to call it like a banner, right? It's basically a banner. I'm going to call it banner wrap. So if you guys are using VS Code, another nifty trick is if you do dot, right, and then you type the name of the class. So like, when we're creating divs, we can actually create them with classes. Like, what Harjot was doing over here, he was using the CSS class selector, right? Similarly, if you use divs, you can also do that, right? So if you do dot banner dash wrap, and I hit enter, you can see that it created the div for me, right? So it has identified that that's a section, right? So it's just a pointer. A section can be really big, like, the banner wrap, or it can be really small as well, right? So it's just used to, separate your code into different sections, different pieces of content. So you can, when you're styling it, you can target it specifically, right? So inside the banner wrap, what I'll do now is I'm going to add like a nav bar. So like you see inside that banner wrap, inside the big banner wrap, there's like a nice little nav bar up there, right? So I'm again going to use the dot nav dash bar. See, and I've created the nav bar. And then under the nav bar, I can actually see, actually just looking into the nav bar itself, there's like a logo over here, and then there's like a button over here, right? So I think that we already created the logo and button. Where is it? Here it is. So logo is over here, over there, like the logo is there, and then the button is over there. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to add a new section called logo, right? And it's normally just really convenient when you put images inside divs. At least in our past experience, you don't have to, but in our past experience, it really helps to just put a div, and then I'm just going to add the A tag over here inside this particular section, right? I'm just going to move the style slightly more so you can see the screen. Hit save, and you can see that now whatever we have inside our banner area, whatever we had, like, the logo, the button is all over here inside this divs, right? The sections, right? We want to compartmentalize our code, and then I'll hand over to Harjot to actually do the styling later on. So it'll make a whole lot more sense once we jump into the styling. But generally, it's always just good practice to understand the kind of elements that you'll be dealing with. So under the nav bar, right? So this is the nav bar. It has a bunch of elements. Under the nav bar, we have like this container. We can call it a container, which has this bunch of elements, right? Oops. Right. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to create another class, right? Dot banner dash container. And then you can see that inside the banner container, we'll have all these different elements that we were creating. Like, there's the H1, there's the H2, right? So I'm just going to copy those, cut actually, and then paste it there. And you can see that we're adding elements into our different sections because we want to compartmentalize our code, right? You don't want to just put everything in the same place, okay? And then the next thing is to have like this get started section, So what I'll do is I'm going to put this H3 inside the get started section. The reason why we're doing that will make a whole lot more sense once we jump into the styling. So normally, like in the first go, you might not actually understand how to put your code into different sections. And while you're styling, it'll make a whole lot more sense. But like for now, just to start off, this is like the kind of structure that we're going to go with. So this is called the get started section, right? In the get started section, we're going to add this H3 tag over here in there, right? And then you can see that we have like, this was the H3 tag. This was the H2, that's the H1. And we've put the H3 tag. You can see there's also a little bit of a gap over there, right? If I inspect the code, right? If I inspect the code, I want to show you guys something, and right click on this and click on inspect. You can see that how Netflix also did it is they had like, the H1, they had the H2, and then they went inside a form. So you can see that they have a form element, right? We called it the get started section, right? But inside there, there's some kind of form, right? So what is a form? Let's talk a little bit about a form, right? So basically in HTML, like similar to like, how we've been dealing with the H1 element, H2 element, the div element, there's also another element called form element. The form, the HTML form is used to collect user input. So I'm sure like when you go to like a login page, if you type your details, normally the details are typed in a form. And then when you click on submit, you have this data that is normally sent to a server for processing, right? So that's basically why we use HTML forms, okay? So this is an example of a structure. So similar to all the tags that we've been dealing with, like the div, the h1, again, it's like very simple form, right? It's the form tag. It looks like this, okay? So what I'll do is I will create a form tag in our code inside our get started section right underneath here. And I'll just do form, right? I'm going to remove this. I don't need that right now. And inside the form, if you observe, we have like this input to take some kind of input in, you know, and then we have a button to click get started, right? So how would we use these elements, right? So these are, again, we're doing a few more HTML elements. Like how would we add this, right? So let's talk a little more about that. There's like, it's called the input element, right? Input is basically like that text field where you can type in a whole bunch of letters, right? So it's used mostly in the form element. So normally, anytime the form element is created, within the form element, you'll find an input element, right? And the input element can display many different kinds of text, right? So you can have, using the type attribute, you can specify exactly what kind of input we're dealing with, because there's multiple ways of taking input, right? So there's like a text field, which we'll be using in our Netflix app. And then there's like a radio button, means like, you know, you can click on multiple options, you know, and there's like checkbox, submit button, you can even have email, you know. So there's a whole bunch of different types of input tags that you can use, right? So what I'll do now is I'll type input, and then you can see by default, VS Code makes it text. But this has to actually be email, right? Because we have to take in an email address, okay? And then you can see that there's like a little text over there asking for email address. So if I save this code, it's actually been a while since I saved the code and looked at our live server. So a good practice, guys, is constantly keep saving your code and looking at it in the live server, what changes you're making. You can see that it kind of looks the same, like just by putting divs, nothing much has changed, right? Because all that divs has done is just like compartmentalized everything for us. But there's this input over here where I can type a whole bunch of stuff, right? So that's a cool new thing. And you can see that it has like a placeholder saying email address, right? So we can use another HTML attribute called placeholder, and then VS Code is allowing me to autocomplete. And I think it's called it's just called email address, right? So it's just called email address. Hit save. Come back here, and now you should be able to see like a nice little placeholder. So you can still type stuff over it, but then when nothing is typed, it says like, hey, you can type your email address over here. And then right next to that, we have this button, right? So how would we actually type a button? Like how would we put a button in a form, right? So again, as you have probably guessed, similar to like, you know, an input element, we have another element called the button element, right? So this button tag defines a clickable button. So these are elements that you'll see on a lot of web pages. Like these are the basic elements. This should be enough to get started, right? If you click on a button, it should perform some kind of action, right? So what we'll do is we're just going to create this button. It's going to be non-functional for now. So actually, I'll just type button. Oops. Button, right? And then I think it says get started. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll say get started caps, and I'll just use that arrow. And if we come back to our page over here, you can see that we have our get started. It appears there, right? So that's basically like the general structure, right? And using divs. So just like to recap, we've used divs over here, and we've just compartmentalized everything. The styles haven't changed, but now I'll be handing over to Harjot, and he'll be diving into the styles, and you guys will be able to take advantage of using these different sections, right? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Actually, before I do that, let me push this code so Harjot can actually grab it real quick. Cool. So I've pushed my code. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Over to you, Harjot. You should be able to pull the code now. Harjot, you're on mute, hey?
Sorry about that. I thought I unmuted myself. Cool. I've pulled Akil's code, and Akil, I guess you've removed all the styling, and this is
Yeah.
what you've.
So
Okay,
I've done all the styling, and
as you
yeah.
can see, what HTML produces doesn't look that beautiful, and this is where CSS comes in. Let's make it look good. Cool. So there are various CSS properties like color. You can add a background, you can add borders, margin, pattern. There's just them hundreds and hundreds of them. But you can't really remember them. So sometimes you just have to use Google and search for what you want to do. But so these are some of the main ones that you will repetitively use, and with time you'll remember them. So the first one is actually font. So CSS font. So fonts based with fonts, you can basically size the fonts, you can change the color of the fonts, you can change the type of the font. And what we'll do is we'll change the size of all the fonts to a specific font, let's say 16, because we want to keep it to one size. And then we'll change the font type, because Netflix definitely doesn't use this default font. So let's see what Netflix actually uses. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to use a Chrome tool. So if you're using Google Chrome, it has an inspect tool that allows us to see the styles of this page. So what I did was I right-clicked and clicked inspect, and a menu will basically pop up, something like that. And using this, I'll be able to find all the styles in this specific page. So for example, the styling in here, it has a font size of 3.125 rem. I'll come back to that in a bit. And then it has a font type. It's definitely not this font. It has a Netflix Sans font. So what I'll do is I already downloaded the font that I need. So what you have to do is go to fonts.google.com, you search for the font you want, you select the styles, then you import it into the CSS page. And how you do that is basically, I'll just basically add the font I downloaded quickly. So Akhil, if you can just put this on chat, because I'm using this font, I've already downloaded it.
Sure thing.
Cool. So you just literally just paste it. Like whatever you copy, you just paste that, and then in your, so what I want to do is I want to style the entire page's font type to change to this specific font I downloaded. It's not Netflix Sans. They don't uh, allow us to use that font. So this is an open source font called Open Sans. So we're going to use that. So I'm going to use the star character to select the entire HTML page, the star selector, and then change the font to the font family actually. Type font, Visual Studio will tell you the various things, the various properties that CSS provides us. You can change the size, the weight, family. Font family allows us to change the type of font we're using. So you click on font family and you basically type Open Sans. I think you can also copy this from Google Fonts. You don't have to type this. And it's a sans serif font. Sans serif. Okay. Cool. Now the next thing is I'm looking the font size of the entire document to be 16px. And I'll come back to that in a bit, why I'm doing that. I'll change it to 16px. So CSS basically has various units, sizing units. And I actually don't have a slide on it, but what I can do is just search on it. So I'll type CSS sizing or units. It's called units. CSS units on Google. So Google is your best friend, guys. So and anytime you don't understand anything, just go to Google and search for what you want to search, and it will help you. So W3 Schools really helps me. And as you can see, CSS has several different units to express length or width. And you can use centimeters, millimeters. We usually use pixels. And all these are absolute length. So what I mean by absolute length is they're basically fixed according to, so pixels is dependent on the centimeters, on millimeters, they're fixed, you know, they're not relative to screen size, they're not relative to some other component. Then we have relative lengths, and this is where lengths like EM, VW, VH, what did I just use? I use REM. REM is not here for some weird reason, but basically,
It is there. It's like the fourth one.
oh yeah, okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so REM, this is what Netflix was using. And if you check over here in styles, they're using 3.125 REM. And we can use REM as well. And what REM does is it's relative to the font size of the root element. This is basically the root element. So this is the reason why I defined font size as 16px, because one REM is usually 16px, and I hope Netflix did that as well. The font size here is 3.125 REM, and when I click on computed and go check the font size, it's 50px. So if you do the calculation, I think it's 3.125 divided by 50. Okay, how would you calculate that? 3.125. Yeah, 50 divided by 125. Yeah, that should give you 16px.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. 50 divided by
Cool.
2.125.
So that is why I'm defining font size in the root element, because I want to use REM as the unit. And REM basically is relative to the font size of the root element. And the font size of the root element is 16px. So if I type 1 REM, I'm basically typing 16px. And px is basically 1 pixel on your screen. Cool. So now that I'm sorted with this CSS fonts, there are other properties like margin, padding, height, width, and we can test that out quickly in one of the divs that Akhil created. So let me choose one of these divs. Let's say, get started. I can style that. So I'm going to do dot get started, give it a height of, let's say, 100px, width of 300px. You won't really see the changes here, but if I give it a color of background color, because color changes the color of the font. So background color will change the background color here, and I'll change that to purple. And as you can see, I've given a height and width to it. Let me just increase the height to about 200 pixels. So it's much more clearer. Let me increase the width as well to about 500 pixels, and you can see the width and height are changing. Now I can also add padding to it. So what padding does is it basically adds space outside of the div. So if I add a padding of 50px, oh, sorry, I actually meant inside of the div. So padding adds space inside of the div, and I right click, inspect this element. So I'm using the Chrome inspect tool again and go to computed. You can basically see the padding over here. Where's it gone? Let me just highlight. So when you click on get selected and click on computed, and you can see this padding of 50px. So that's basically the padding. So the highlighted part is the padding, that's 50px. Margin is the space outside of the border, outside of the div. And let me give it 60px. And you'll see that there's some space created outside of this div border. Let me actually also give it a border color so you can exactly see the boundaries. So I'm going to use border 1px, solid. So these are some of the properties of CSS. You can go type CSS border and it will tell you how to use it. So I'm just going to use this quickly, and I'll change this to black. I'll create a black border. Oops. Cool. It's not that clear. I'm just gonna make it like 5px. And as you can see, there's a border. The margin is outside the border. Then we have the 5-pixel border, and then we have the padding. But if you noticed, I defined a height of 200 pixels and 500 pixels. But if I go to styles, it is 200 pixels and 500 pixels, but that's just the div. The padding created more height. So this is basically not 200 pixels or 500 pixels, because 500 pixels was a small box, and the padding increased the height, the actual height, and the margin even increased it more. And to solve this problem, this is where box sizing comes in. So the thing is,
sorry to interrupt. I think people are having difficulty accessing that import statement in the live stream. For some reason, someone can't see it while I'm dropping it in the chat. So is it possible that you push this code up, right? Just push the code. And then guys, you can access this link, right? From the code that's pushed up to GitHub, right? So you just go to GitHub, open the style.css, and then you'll be able to copy the link.
Cool. I'm just gonna commit it quickly.
I think next time we'll just put it in the pre-requirements. Also, you can access it straight from the apply.xi.io page.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to download it directly from the website, but it was going to be time consuming.
Yeah, no stress.
Cool. So I've pushed the code, and you should be able to see code that a page that looks something like this if you download the code now. So what I basically spoke right now is the box model. So the div was basically the content. Oops. Then we added padding inside the div. Then we gave the div a border and then a margin around that div. But we noticed that the actual height and width of the div was increased. It wasn't actually 200 pixels and 500 pixels. 200 pixels and 500 pixels look much smaller than this. So if I remove padding and margin right now, I'll just comment this part out. Just going to use command / and save. You can see it's much smaller, but we want the padding and margin to be inside this height and width. I don't want the height and width to change. And to solve that problem, we use box sizing. It basically allows us to include padding and border inside an element's total width. The margin is left out, so a margin will basically create some space, and that is needed, but the padding and border will stay inside the element's total width and height. So without box sizing, the actual width of an element will include padding and border. But if you add box sizing, border box CSS property, the padding and width stays inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to uncomment this again. And as you can see, the box size increased. I'm going to use the CSS property. It's basically, where is it gone? Box sizing. It's called box sizing, border box. I'll do this in the root element so that it can be applied to each and every element in the HTML page. Just gonna save, and as you can see, something changed, right? The actual width and height was applied. The padding was is now inside the div element, and as well as the border. So I'm just gonna comment this one more time so you can see the change, what changed. I'm just gonna reduce the size. So this is without border sizing. It's not the actual width and height that I specified. When I add box sizing, the actual width and height is now shown on the HTML page. So this is why we use box sizing border box. And I'm going to leave it there so that we can actually use the actual height and width.
Yeah, guys, just a pointer, like normally in every project, this is going to be like the similar structure. Like, the root element, all projects will have this box sizing border box because you want the size that you specify to be applied to the div. You don't want the extra side like margin padding and stuff to interfere with the height and width that you specify. So this is like great for you because you can reuse this code in future. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm just going to delete this code because we don't want to put any styling into it, and we can jump right into styling our Netflix landing page. The first thing I'll do is some of these elements have some margin and padding. So for example, there's some padding over here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to root element and remove that. So I'm going to mention margin as 0, padding as 0, and save this, and all the padding and margin from the HTML page is gone now. So usually some of these div elements, h1 tags can have a default padding and margin, and we just removed that. We've defined font size, font family, cool. Now the next thing we will be doing is background. So if you notice, Netflix landing page actually has a background over here. And a background is, so CSS has a property called background, and it's used to define the background effects for an element. And within background, there are various different tab properties. So for example, there's background color, I've been using that. There's opacity, background image, background size. You can repeat it multiple times. You can specify the position of the background. So we'll be defining the Netflix background right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the main div, which is the banner wrap. So I'll do dot banner wrap and add some background to it. So I'm going to use the background property of CSS. And as you can see, the first tag, this is the shorthand. So I'm going to use the shorthand. I'm going to put the background color. I don't need a background color. I need a background image. I need to make sure it doesn't repeat, and the position is right from the top left. That's where I want it to start. So to use the background, to add an image to it, you basically use the parameter URL, and this allows us to specify the URL of the assets that we want to use. So URL, and then I'll click the folder /assets, and I've already got the background image downloaded. I want to make sure that it does not repeat. The position is like right on the top left. So position 0, 0, top left, and repeat is no repeat. I don't want the background image to fill the screen. Visual Studio is cool. It helps you say, like, gives you different, like tells you what parameters each and every property has. Cool. So there is our background. Doesn't look that great, hey? So we need to specify the height and width to this. The width is by default 100% of the screen. Yep, it is. Well, we need to find the width to it. So I mean the height to it. So if I go to the Netflix landing page and try to figure out what the height is over here for the banner, I'm going to go to the root, the basic layout. Let me just close this. Let's just estimate how big the height is. The height starts from the top to the bottom. I'm just going to use my screenshot tool to see how big this is, about 600, 700 pixels. The total height is about 900. That's about 80% of the screen. So I'm gonna use the height 80 view height. And what view height is, if I go back to CSS units, view height is relative to the 1% of the height of the view. But what that means is it's basically gonna take 80% of your browser screen, your screen size. So let me just save this. Let's see. Awesome. Looks much like it. Hey, yeah.
Yeah.
Now the next thing is I need to make sure. So if you reduce the size of the browser, it keeps like the image changes, like it crops off. I need to make sure it fills the entire screen. So To do that, I'll use the property background. It's called background size. So background size basically specifies the size of an image. There's like auto, height, you can specify the height and width. I'm going to use cover. Cover will basically fill the entire div. So background size has to be cover. Cool. That's much like it. All right. And the next thing is I need to make sure that this background image is center aligned. So when it comes to like a mobile phone or anything, the image needs to stay centered aligned. So I'm going to use the background position here. And I'll just specify center. I've done CSS since like a number of times. I've been using CSS, so I remember these properties. But if you are confused, you can definitely Google it. Google helps you with these properties. You can, if you type CSS background, it will tell you the various different background properties, and you can use that as a guide, as a starting guide. All right, cool. So I'm just going to make sure that there's no margin of padding. There's no margin of padding. And I've defined the banner wrap now. So the next thing is I need to make sure that this Netflix logo, let's start off with the menu bar. So this top bar up here is the menu bar. There's Netflix and the sign in button. And I see Akhil called it the nav bar. He's put in logo inside it, and he's put in the button. So what I'm gonna do is, let's go to the next one. Okay, let's just take a question break. Akhil, anyone with any questions?
Yeah, guys, I just want to put it out there. Like, I know this might seem like it's a lot, but the cool thing about this is you have something to refer to. Like, the session is being recorded. You can refer to the session. You know, you can connect with us on Instagram, or you can reach out to us by email. I'm happy to help you guys. This can be a bit overwhelming. Like, CSS can be overwhelming. We're trying our best to make it, like, you know, as compressed as possible and teach you what you need to get started. So definitely let us know if you have any questions. We're happy to help.
Right, awesome. So I see we only have about 30 minutes left. So we'll try to finish up the first part at least. I don't want this to go over to the next workshop. Let's see though. The next thing I'm going to talk about is CSS Flexbox. So to position this, so as you can see, the logo size is massive. The position, the layout of this looks terrible right now. CSS has a Flexbox property. It's basically a layout module inside CSS. It allows us to give a good layout to the HTML page. It's easier. There are multiple ways of adding a layout in CSS. There's positioning. There are various other ways, but I personally like Flexbox. And it's quite simple. It's easier. It's probably like one of the easiest method to design a flexible responsive layout. So you can use Flexbox to design for a mobile screen as well. So that's the best part. And to start off with, you use the display property of CSS and define it as flex, and that will basically change the div display as Flexbox. So I'm just going to do that first thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the nav bar to go over it. So I'll type the nav bar property class over here and change display as flex so that I can use the various Flexbox properties. And Flexbox has various properties. It has flex direction, wrap, flow, justify content, align items, and each one has its own functionality. The first one is flex direction. It basically defines the direction in which the container, the div container, can be any HTML element container. It helps it stack the items inside it. So if you change the flex direction to row, the items will basically align as a row. If you change it as a column, the items will align in a column format. You can reverse the way the column is being displayed. You can start with the last item first. You can use, and then you can do the same thing with the row reverse as well. And then we have justify content, and this basically helps us align the flex items. So as you know, we aligning items, right? And justify content helps us align the items inside the element. So if this is a div element, you can align it right at the start. Use flex start for that. You can center align it using center. You can align it right to the end using flex end. Space around will create equal space throughout the items inside the element, and space between will push all the items to the end and make sure each and every item has equal spacing. And then we have align items, and align item basically aligns the item in the opposite direction. So if this was doing it horizontally, align items will align the items vertically. So if you want to center line, flex start, the same concept, but in the opposite direction. And then flex wrap basically wraps. So sometimes what happens is some elements. So if you have multiple elements, let's say there's enjoy your TV, this div, there's another div, there's another, like maybe another div after the video, it might overflow and go outside of the screen. So flex wrap helps us wrap around the screen. So if you change the screen sizing, let me see if this does it. Yeah, so that was basically flex wrap. So when I reduced the size, Netflix didn't want the video to go outside of the screen or get smaller. It pushed it down. So that's what flex wrap would actually do. Cool. Now let's use this in our Netflix page. Let's fix this top nav bar. So I've changed the display to flex, so I can now use the Flexbox. The first thing I'm gonna do is change the sizing of this Netflix logo. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to the landing page, Netflix landing page, right click on the Netflix logo, click inspect, and they're actually using an SVG. SVG is another image type, but I think we already have saved it as a PNG file. So that's another way of saving an image. So I'm just gonna click on computer just to find out what the height is of this SVG. It says 16 pixels. That's the font size. So SVG, I think, uses the font size maybe. I think it's about 16 pixels. But 16 pixels is quite small actually, eh? Akhil, do you know what the size is for this? Let me just play around with it. So
yeah,
to
just
access,
test it.
yeah. So inside the nav bar, so I think I didn't go through this type of selector where you select the selector inside a div. So if there's a banner wrapping around the various div, and there are other classes inside, such as navbar, logo inside navbar, you can access the logo class. You can access it right from outside. So if I do dot logo, it will change all the logo classes throughout the HTML page with the CSS properties inside this dot logo. But if I do dot navbar dot logo, it will only change the CSS of the logo class inside the navbar class. Hope that made sense. So I just went inside navbar, and then the dot logo is the class inside navbar, and I'm gonna give it a height of let's say 50 pixels. I think this looks like 50 pixels. That didn't change. Oh, yeah. So why it doesn't work is because I'm using an image tag over here. So if you want to style a tag, you explicitly have to mention the tag. So it's dot logo, then the image inside the logo class, logo div. This is weird. It's not working. So I make sure I've got everything right. Let's remove this part. Okay, do you see where the error is? Why this?
Remove the dot logo above. Maybe that's interfering somehow.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Sorry about that.
I think
So
50 might be a bit much. I think 50 should be like, the height of the nav bar. I mean, let's see what Netflix did. Like 50 looks a bit big.
yeah, it looks quite big. Yeah. So I'll make it like 40. 40 looks much like it. 35 probably.
I think try and make it 35.
35. Yeah. I'm just gonna stick to 35. And then now as you can see, when I did display flex, the sign in button was initially below. So let me just comment out display flex to see what changes were made. Sign in button was below, but the Flexbox default is row. So whenever I define a div as Flexbox, the default is row. So when I change this, when I add display flex, the sign in button comes right next to the logo image. All right, cool. Now what I'll do is let's go back to our Netflix page, and there's some sort of padding over here. Let me see if I can figure out what the padding is. Okay, there's a 6. So when I highlight the div, I can see there's a 56 pixels margin on the div, and then
Yeah.
20 pixels top padding. So I'm going to add that into the nav bar. So padding top was 20 pixels, and margin top is 0, left, right. So I'm using the margin shorthand. You can define the top, right, bottom, left using this method. Left and right was 50 pixels. Was it 50?
Yeah.
56. 56.
Okay.
So top and bottom 0. Awesome. That looks good. That looks better.
Yeah. Harjit, maybe you want to just explain, like, how there's like padding top, margin top, like just an extension of the padding and margin.
Okay, cool. So maybe if let me just search for this on CSS properly on Google. So if I do CSS padding, and go to CSS padding. So as you can see, Google really helps you. So padding has different CSS properties as well. So padding is the default, is a shorthand. You can add top, right, bottom, left, but you can define the padding top itself. If you just want to add padding to the top, if you just want to add it to the right, you can do the same thing. So these are some of the CSS properties. The margin has the same exact properties. You just replace padding with margin. And then the shorthand is padding. So the first part is top padding. The second part in the padding property is the right padding, then the bottom padding, and then the left padding. The other way is if you're using two values, the first one is basically the top and bottom, and the second one is the right and left. And that's what I used here. The top is 0, top and bottom 0. Left and right is 56 pixels. And for padding, I just wanted the top padding. I didn't want any bottom, left, or right padding. So I defined padding top as 20 pixels. Cool. Now, as you can see, there's some sort of like the A tag has its own color, has an underline in it, and you can remove that by using a CSS property called text decoration. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the root element and use a text decoration and keep it as none. And this will basically remove all the text decoration from all the fonts in the HTML documents and keep it as default. So as you can see, there's no underline in this right now. So if I zoom in, there's no underline in the A tag. So that was text decoration. Okay, cool. Now the next thing is I want this to be right at the end. And to do this, I'm going to use the flex direction. Actually, yeah, justify content. Justify content helps me with space between. It will push the first element and the last element right towards left and right. So I'm going to say justify content space between and this will push the sign in right to the end. Now, let's define that sign in. You can't really see it and doesn't look like what Netflix is using. So let's actually change the format of this. Let's actually create this button. Let's see what Akhil has done. He's given an A tag to it. What I'll do is I'll just add a class here, a class called button. Cool, BTN. And inside it's inside navbar. So I'm going to use navbar. And then it's inside, yeah, I can go directly BTN. .btn. I want the color to be white, the font color. And then the background color should be red. And I'm going to use a cool tool that Google Chrome provides me. It's called a color picker. So anyway, so I'm going to right click on this, click inspect, go to styles. And when you click on that specific HTML tag, it's actually an A tag. You can see the various properties they're using. So you can see it has a font size of 1 rem, float is right. We don't have to use float. Float is another way of layout, giving a layout to HTML, but we're using Flexbox, so that's fine. So I'm just going to highlight this part because we'll be using this to the button and change that. Cool. So it has a background color, line height, padding, font weight, font size. What I did was I literally went to the styles parts, highlighted all the styles I wanted, and I'm just going to copy paste. I'm just going to save some time like this. Cool, that's the button. Doesn't look like the button we're using. This is weird. I think it's not 1 rem, eh? It's very different. So let's just look at computer. Let's see. Oh, it actually has a border, bottom has a border. So it has some slight border to it. So what I'm gonna do is, can I copy paste this? I can't.
I think just add border, just use border radius, right? It'll add it all across, right?
Yeah, so it's 3 pixels, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if that works. That works, but the height seems a bit too big. I think they're not using border sizing, border box, and the padding also gets inside the button. So I'm just going to reduce this to like about 1 pixel. Let's see if that's, no, that didn't work. Weird. Has a line height. Can I just remove line height? Maybe that's playing around with it. Let's see, let's inspect what the problem is. Why is it so big? It has a padding all around it, and the font size is a bit too big compared to the font size here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this font size. Let's see in computer what the font size is. Actually 16 pixels, which should be fine because our root sizing is actually 16 pixels. So I'm just going to reduce it a bit, maybe 0.9. rem, reduce the padding to about 5 pixels. Font weight stays the same. That didn't help. So I'm just going to leave it as 1 rem. We'll come back to it. At least we have the button sorted. Maybe it's actually not center aligned, eh? Akhil, do you see the problem here?
Yeah, just go to the just go to computer.
Yeah. Our computer.
Yeah, yeah, computer. Yeah, for our app. Yeah. So I just want to see what the issue is.
The height and it's this.
Yeah, the height. This is the problem. The height and width seems to be the.
Yeah. Why is it getting a height?
I think just, do you want to just specify the height maybe?
Let's see what height they're using. So they're using a height of, there's a margin top, bottom. Oh, if I add margin top. Yeah, let's come back to it again. We have about 10 minutes, so I just want to continue with other concepts as well. So we have the button on the top right, the Netflix logo on the top left. Now the next thing I want to change is the styling for the H1, the H2 tags. And let's see what what styling this thing has. We'll right click on unlimited movies, go to styles, and I can see it has a font size of 3.125 rem, and I'm going to do the same thing for our, and it's actually called banner container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the layout of banner container first, so that it comes right at the center, and we can center line it. So banner dash container, and change the display to flex. This will allow us to use Flexbox. And once that is done, justify content center. That will center line it. Everything should come towards the center. Let's go back to it. Comes to the center, but as you can see, it's a row. Let me just change the color of the content inside it. So color white. And as you can see, everything is a row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the flex direction of this. So the flex direction should actually be a column. And there you go. The flex direction is now column. Perfect. And now I'm going to do, now when you change the flex direction, the justify content and align item now swap. So now instead of using justify content to center align it horizontally, you'll use align items. And align items will basically get everything center line. Awesome. Now let's actually see what's happening here. Let me also do justify content center, so it's center line vertically. And let's change the font size of.
Maybe you want to just push the code that people can maybe just download it again and follow along with what we have so far.
Oh, okay, git push commit. Right. Yeah. Okay. Now, the next thing, what we were doing. Okay, changing the size of H1. So I'll say the banner container. I'll call that class. And inside the banner container, I'm going to start the H1 tag. Okay, the H1 tag is actually 3.125 rem font size. So I'll change the font size of it to 3.125 rem. Cool. That looks better, but it's actually in a straight line. So we might need to define a width to it. So let's just go back to this. Let's see what's going on over here. For the entire box here, let's see the entire div. So the entire div is actually has a padding, has some sort of padding of 70 pixels and 45 pixels. So I'm just going to copy this, and that is on the banner container. So I'm just going to add it to the banner container, and then let's see what's happening here. Okay, our banner container.
Maybe like, Netflix actually did is they use a BR tag. So like, right after unlimited movies, I think.
Okay,
so that
yeah, awesome. That's a simpler way. That's easier.
Yeah.
So after TV, they're using a BR tag, and what the BR tag does is it's basically a break line. It pushes all the content after the BR tag to the next line. So that's BR doesn't have a closing tag. Let's go see if that works. That works. Everything after TV was gone to the next line. But the font needs to center line. So I'm going to use text align on H1. So I'll just say, actually, everything seems center aligned inside here. Eh? Yeah, everything's center aligned. I'm just going to center line all the text inside banner container. So I'll say text align. So this is another CSS property that helps you align the font. So text align center, and everything should center line now. Awesome. Looking good. Now the next thing is let's change the font size of watch anywhere, cancel anytime. I'm gonna right click on that, inspect, and see what the font size is. The font size is actually 1.625 rem. So that's on the H2 tag. So I'm gonna use banner container H2 font size of 1.625 rem. 0.625 rem. Cool. And that changes the size of that. Now the next thing I
Just
should do is
sorry to interrupt, but like I think we are running out of time, and we don't want to go over time. So I think let us just end it over here for now, right? I know, guys, that we haven't wrapped it up yet because I think a lot of time went in admin, and also we're also teaching the concepts while doing it. So I suggest that we continue this in the next workshop, right? In workshop 3. And if you haven't attended this live, it's all right. You can catch up via the recording. And then workshop 4 could be slightly longer so that we can actually do the YouTube app. All right. So this is just a suggestion. What we'll do is we're going to send out the feedback form, right? You guys can give us feedback on what your thoughts are and how you would like us to go about the future workshops. Because I know we specified 1.5 hours. I know you guys probably have other commitments, midterms, and so on. So yeah, we're just gonna end this right now over here, right? And we can carry on in the upcoming workshops. Okay. So yeah, so basically we still covered a whole lot more CSS. Like, in the coming workshops, we will be sharpening a lot of these concepts. Like, we'll be repeating a lot of things. Like, we'll be using Flex again, and then hopefully we're going to wrap up, like, a certain version of the Netflix app. Like, we do not want to rush this because these are the basics. You got to get the basics right. So that's why we'll not rush this. We're gonna extend this to the next workshop, and then perhaps after that we'll have like a little longer workshop to the YouTube clone where we can build YouTube live, like within normally, like, this takes about 3 hours. I know that's slightly long, but that's a good amount of time to actually build out the entire product live. So we'll actually just give us your feedback, guys. Give us your thoughts on this. Help us deliver the best quality of content to you. Like, your feedback will really mean a lot. So what I'll do now is I'm going to just send out the feedback link on the chat. So I want you guys to take like a minute or two. It's not even going to take longer than a minute to just give us the feedback right now, right? This is really going to help us make sure that we're for the upcoming workshops, that we're actually creating value for you guys. And make sure that you guys are actually understanding these concepts, because the basics are extremely important. If we go jump right into the the YouTube clone, a lot of you might end up getting lost. So Harjot, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think you've covered up much of everything. One thing I'd like to mention is if you have any other questions, or if you're watching this later, you can directly contact us on Instagram. We are very responsive on Instagram, so feel free to DM us on Instagram, and we'll help you out sort out the issues.
Yeah, guys, and also,
Awesome.
like, this might seem like it's a little rushed. Like, don't worry about it. You can watch the recording again. Let us know if you have any questions. Also, we do run training programs. That's what we do as Zayo. And basically, if you're keen to join one of our programs where we go in depth with a lot of these concepts until it sticks in you, you can definitely check out our landing page. Check out the program that we offer. We offer 2 programs: the web development part-time and the web development plus. With web development, you will build 30 plus projects, just learning these concepts, making sure it sticks. Web development plus, you get a guaranteed internship placement. You get to work on your own business idea if you have one, or we will propose a business idea to you to work on. And who knows, you could build a side income stream through that. So those are the 2 things that we offer. And specifically for anyone watching this, if you are part of the DSC network, any of the DSC clubs that we've partnered with, definitely use this code. If you're interested, we do have programs running all through, like, this year, next year. So, like, if you're not available, like, in the next one, think about the future ones, and we'd love to get to know you guys. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Cool. Did you drop the link on the YouTube chat?
Yeah, so I dropped the feedback link, guys. Just emphasizing on the feedback. Like, it'll really help us. This is just purely to give us feedback. This form, it has no other agendas or anything. It's just help you guys better. We want to deliver high quality workshops for you guys. Yes.
All right. So I'm just gonna play some music in the meantime. Shout out to Scala's playlists, like amazing.
Oh, it seems to be an issue. Like, Shane can't see the link for some reason. Can
okay.
you guys see the link? Like, Erin, Anudit, Ali, can you guys see the link? AJ,
No, we can't.
you actually can't see it in the YouTube live stream? Huh.
No, not really.
Okay, that's really strange. Harjot, do you mind trying to post the link? Maybe
Yeah.
I'm not logged in Zayo right now,
Just
so
drop,
I'm unable to post the link.
just drop the link on the chat here on the Zoom chat.
Try that. Try now.
Cool. Right. Cool. Can everyone see the link? Awesome.
Okay, great, guys. Next time I'm just gonna be logged in with my Zayo account. For some reason, I'm on my personal account right now. Weird.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, guys, please give us your feedback. So that any thoughts that you have on this workshop, specifically the next workshop, and possibly even future workshops. We're happy to collaborate more with all the DSC clubs over here. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Awesome.
Yeah,
And also, if you have any,
it was nice marking
yeah,
your.
yeah, Ali.
Yeah, I said it was nice marketing your event. Pretty good workshop.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Also, guys, we'd love to hear any feedback on the duration. Do you think that we can do the workshop slightly longer? You think we can maybe extend it to 2 hours so that we can cover a whole lot more? Just let us know your thoughts so that we can optimally deliver these workshops. Shout out to Erin. Hearing a shout out from the chat. Also, I saw a shout out earlier to Anudit from Piyush. So shout out to Anudit. Awesome, guys. So Shane is having a few issues with the live server. So Rajat, maybe do you want to share your screen and just walk us through the live server? So guys, we're happy to take a couple of questions now for the next 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. So basically the first thing is to install the live server, and you do that by going to the extensions button here in Visual Studio. It looks like that app icon. You just type live server, and the live server should pop up. The extension, my internet's a bit slow, not coming up. Okay, there you go. And it's actually the live server by Ritwik Day. So install this first, make sure it's enabled, and then you can go back to your folder, your Explorer, that looks like the page icon, and right-click on the index.html, right-click on it, and you open with live server, okay? So when you click on that, the live server will automatically open up.
Yeah, but I think, guys, you have to make sure that your browser, like in your computer, your default browser is Chrome, so that it opens it in Chrome. Maybe that could be an issue you're experiencing because your default browser is maybe something else.
Yeah. I'm just gonna git push this in the meantime.
Yeah,
so
you can also access it from your folder settings.
Sorry, Ali?
You can open up your index.html from your folder settings too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so if you open this, let me just open this in a Finder, Reveal in Finder, and you can directly open this index.html. So if I just directly open it, you can open it up. But the only drawback with this is every time you make a change to your HTML or CSS, it will not automatically refresh. You have to manually click the refresh button.
Yeah, that's the disadvantage of this.
Cool. The code should now be on GitHub, so everyone can access this half-done Netflix.
Yeah, so guys, as you can see, we have quite a bit left to do. Like, adding the overlay in the background so it looks a whole lot more like Netflix. And then we'll do the one part below it where we have like, the title on the left. And then we have like that TV and the video on the right. Surjit, maybe. Yeah, like this. And once we do these two, this is sufficient. You guys can build out the remaining parts. And also we'll just cover a little bit on the footer. We won't do the whole thing. We're just gonna like use the ordered list and unordered list and style that a little bit. And then the rest could be up to you guys. So this is actually, it'll be like a really cool project to add to your portfolio. And then after that, we can do like YouTube clone, and we could go like proper all in that, do it a little longer than 1.5 hours perhaps. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the feedback, guys. Also the DSC leads, guys, please just drop the feedback for us so that we can analyze it later on, so that we can, just do our best here. We want to make the most out of this.
I just want to open up our previous Netflix clone that we did. It's actually live on Netlify right now. And this was done in one of our previous workshops. We just created the first part, the second part, and the footer. Guys, how legit does this look? This looks like Netflix. This is our clone, and this is the original Netflix. I don't see a difference, eh?
Only the background URL is different. I think Netflix keeps changing their background, eh? Like when we lost it was blacklist. Great. This was good. This was good. I really wish we covered a little more, but I think it's okay as long as people were able to keep up.
Just to reiterate, if you're interested in our program, there is a code over here that you can use. Gets you $200 off. Cool. Just check if there are any other questions on the chat. Shout out to Erin. Best lead in the world. All right, guys. I guess we can wrap up now.
Yeah, guys. Just thank you so much for the workshop. We'll see you guys in the next one.